As a composer, what did you see as the inherent challenges of signing on to a project which is obviously led by Taylor Sheridan?
Yeah, first of all, thrilled to get an opportunity to work with Taylor. He's been somebody I've admired in the industry for quite a long time. You know, the Sicario movies definitely got my attention. And from that, Hell or High Water, one of my favorite films. So, you know, we were introduced maybe 2 years ago now and started talking about this project early on. And really, for me, when the writing is that good and the characters are that good, the music can play a role in talking about the things the visuals don't do, really telling the part of the story that, you know, a really good score for a really good project can draw similarities between characters who never meet on screen or who never see each other, but can really tell some of the broader themes. And I think really the challenge was in trying to portray the humanity of these characters that society teaches us to completely write off and disregard the minute they're given a certain label as a criminal or a gang member or you know, corrupt in some way, but to really allow the music to give some insight and some understanding, and even in some instances some empathy for someone who in normal life you might never get to that point. You might write them off prior to that.
Yeah. I was going to say, from the perspective of the score, what were the early creative conversations that you had with Taylor? What did they focus on primarily?
Really, this is a really dark world. And, you know, there's a lot of darkness in this town with these people, with all of the characters. And it's really, it almost felt like a sense of finger painting. You know, let's take this white sheet of paper, let's smear the black paint all over it. And then let's start to show little rays of sunlight through that we can expand upon and hopefully open as time goes on. One of the most interesting things we talked about in the early going was that Mike McLusky, who's played by, apologies for that. Right. And I'll start over. Mike McLusky, who's played by Jeremy Renner, is a former inmate. He's been in prison. He's been inside for much of his life. And as I started researching, in particular, the prison where they were filming this, it's a almost 200-year-old prison. It has the infamous reputation as being, you know, the place where it was the worst riot in the country's history. And part of the instigation for the riot is, at the time this prison was built in the late 1800s, they had a rotunda that had a giant bell in it, and this bell would ring. And you have to imagine the rotunda almost looking like St. Paul's Cathedral, having this dome at the top that would amplify the sound. So this bell would ring in this giant stone structure. And the prisoners, as soon as they rioted, their first mission was to decimate this bell, break into the guard area, the fenced off guard area, and capture the bell and just pummel it and destroy it, which really gives you a sense of the oppression of sound inside the prison and how that's contributing to really the torture of being incarcerated. So in talking with Taylor early on, we thought, you know, it's fascinating that Mike McLusky's character can't, even though he's out of prison now, he can't escape this prison town. And there's a lot of parallels with the idea of not being able to escape the acoustic torture of a prison and a penitentiary of this kind. So one of the very first things I did is actually, prior to filming, and this is one of the huge advantages of getting to read the script and work early on, is I went into the actual prison where they were filming and brought in a bunch of musicians, and we recorded a bunch of, initially the idea was, let's record a bunch of percussion elements, let's record some motifs that I'd written for early medieval instruments. And partway through the first day, I leaned over and I started hitting one of the walls and cages with a a mallet. And that just started this whole new creative idea where we started playing the prison, much in the idea that, you know, if you're going to murder someone in prison, you have to build a shiv out of something you find. And we thought it'd be amazing to basically have these rhythms and these textures that are created with the walls and the pieces and the remnants of materials hanging in the prison. So that started us down a really interesting path. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of the score is influenced, and a lot of Mike's music that Mike is hearing is probably echoing what he was hearing when he was incarcerated.
So would you say that it was important early on to establish themes for both? Obviously, it was important to establish themes for both character and for individual locations, because you can feel the score change depending on where you are within the town at any given point. So I would say an extension of that would be, to what extent would you say your score influenced the mood and obviously maintain momentum in keeping the narrative going forward?
Well, it's interesting you say that. We made a conscious decision. I mean, there are many different groups, gangs, SWAT team, you know, the McLusky family. We made a conscious decision for the music to not do a Peter and the Wolf idea where it's really giving you a sense of, and that's not uncommon. It's you look at any score and you'll hear William's theme or Sally's, or things like that. I mean, there's a certain amount of that in every score and every story, but in this we really wanted to. We felt visually, and with everything else going on, there's so many other defined elements that are defining these cliques and these segregated groups and teams, so to speak, that we really wanted the music to do the opposite, and it to draw the similarities and who's suffering, how they're all struggling. And to me, it was a fascinating project to do, especially in this day and age where the world is really retreating into these little groups. And I feel like Taylor's written a story where if we were all talking and all listening, this would be what we would hear. So I really wanted the music to help tell that part of the story and draw these similarities, because it feels like really in this time period that isn't happening in present day.
I was going to say, for me, I've only had the opportunity to see 2 episodes, but it's apparent early on that the dynamic of the show hinges very much upon family, and not necessarily just family on the street, but obviously behind bars as well. So if you could maybe expand on how you've made that distinction within the score, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so there are a few things. One, Dianne Wiest's character, who plays Miriam McLusky, the mother, in addition to being the mother of these 3 boys who are sort of operating somewhere in between the law, she's also a teacher, and she's teaching at a prison and she's teaching at a university. And she's teaching it. You never really know, but you do get a glimpse into some of these lessons. And there seems to be a lot of lessons of genocide, the ends of civilizations, colonialism.
Yeah, sure.
And to me, early on, it felt like Taylor had touched upon these stories of annihilation of beings. And it felt like there was a prophecy idea that she was telling these stories, but at the same time, she was looking at her own sons and her own family and seeing the writing on the wall and seeing that they were mid-evolution, mid-history of experiencing the same sort of, end, annihilation. So I wrote a theme that we actually use over one of the first lessons, and I call it the prophecy theme. And as she's talking about, slavery, and she's talking about the indigenous people being obliterated in North America by the Europeans, we take that theme later and we start to apply it and put it over scenes where she's talking to her sons and saying, you can't keep going down this path. And that really was the bar of what we wanted to do with the music. We wanted to draw these comparisons and really, they're all in the scripts. Taylor had those in his head when he was writing them. So I just really wanted to highlight them and bring them out in in more of a subconscious way and not a conscious way. But it ends up being quite effective when you hear this theme that was really introduced to the audience, hearing about, you know, this terrible genocide that happened, and then see the characters, you know, making bad choices, bad decisions, getting involved, making deals with bad people, who are not always the criminals, incidentally. No. And yeah, so that part was really interesting. The other really interesting thing we talked about early on was thinking about Lord of the Flies. Think of the idea of, you know, and even the police and the law enforcement in this and the guards, think of them as a bunch of teenage boys on an abandoned island who don't have the oversight, who have too much power and don't know how to restrain themselves or draw the line. And what is that, you know, when they all kind of beat someone up and look the other way and, oh, no one's going to say anything. It really reminded me of that Lord of the Flies story with these teenage boys going without any oversight and going too far and being kind of pushed into a position of authority without having the skill set or even the conscience to regulate what they're doing.
I was going to say there's a pivotal scene in coming toward the end of the second episode where the score radically changes and it focuses primarily on the witness of an execution. And for me, as I said, there's such a radical deviation in terms of what happens outside and the rest of the score up to that point. I wondered if maybe you could expand on how you approach that, because it's a very dark piece of music to obviously go with a very dark scene.
Yeah, it's what I find really interesting with music is that, and that scene in particular, without giving it away, sometimes when you're trying to basically score, it's really easy to score someone's kinetic action. So if there's a SWAT team or a gang or a fight or something, you know, scoring it with really fast, aggressive music. But to actually sometimes scoring someone's reaction with calm, knowing, and you can know that they are ratcheting, winding that elastic band internally, but by not commenting on the potential energy that's being built up inside, if the viewer can recognize, which in Taylor's material they can, that that's happening, then the music not allowing you to quantify how much tension is being built up inside is a little bit like not showing the shark in Jaws, I think. It's giving you this sense that I know it's building, the music's not holding my hand, it's not telling me how much it's building, but I know it's there. And I think it's almost scary. I mean, it's like the shark. It's excuse me, it's more terrifying to not always have your hand held and not always have the narration tell you what's going on. So in the scene you're talking about, I mean, it's really going back and forth between anger and frustration and regret, and you know, and I think in that sense, the music, I didn't want the music to give away which was authentic, or if either were, you know, if either were the true side. So it's I did a project years ago with Donald Sutherland, and he was directing and producing, and we became friends over the course of the project. And it was an amazing opportunity for me to talk to him about how an actor feels about score, because an actor of his level, I know, is really walking a tightrope between how much they're showing, how much they're restraining. And I recognize that, you know, an actor can hold back only to have the score completely open a back door and show all their inner feeling that they purposefully weren't showing. So that was a really good lesson for me, to have those conversations with him and really understand, make sure that the music doesn't reveal something the actor isn't trying to. And, you know, I draw a lot of comparisons with Jeremy and his acting with Donald. There's a real restraint there and so much acting that happens between the lines instead of with the dialogue.
I was watching, coincidentally, we were watching Arrival, myself and my wife. We were sitting in here watching it the other day, and it's one of the few examples of Jeremy Renner not doing anything. And by which I mean not a lot of dialogue, not a lot of action. And he does so much, as you say, he does so much with silence and so much within the scene without appearing to do much at all. And it's one of those things which I don't think is exploited quite as much as it should be within his skill set. But it's just a little side note. What I was going to say, from your point of view, you've obviously worked with Peyton a great deal in terms of collaboration. So my question would be, which is it that draws you to a project? Is it the creative collaboration, or is it more of an instinctive attachment to the material?
It's both, but ahead of both of those is having a pretty clear roadmap of what I can do to make it better.
Right. Yeah.
So I you know, in the case of, I mean, Brad's expanded upon his repertoire and is doing a lot of different types of projects now. But initially, when we worked together on this action film, it's okay, the action's obvious, and how can maybe the music should be doing the opposite. Maybe the music should be making you care about the characters before they're in these action moments, so that the stakes are so much higher by the time you get there. And so I think it's having a sense of what I can do to better tell the story, what I can do musically, and also, can I do something I've never done before? Can I, because a lot of times, when I worked with Michael Dana, he'd talk about it being in the trenches. How's your project going? I'm still in the trenches trying to dig my way out. And it's almost putting yourself in an uncomfortable place where you have to use tools you've never used before to work your way out. And it's similar I think a lot of musicians can relate. The first time you pick up if you're a piano player, and the first time you pick up a guitar, or the first time you pick up a hurdy-gurdy or a nickel harp or something, you have this musical skill set. You have these tools, these paths, these neuron pathways that you've used in the past to make music. But suddenly the outlet's completely different and you don't understand it. And while it can create an uncomfortable situation, it actually can be the most rewarding situation, because it causes you to come up with something you've never come up with before. If you can get out of the maze, you can find your way out, you are in a new place. So instruments can be seen that way. I look at projects that way. And certainly when I read Mayor of Kingstown, I immediately knew, okay, the music could do this, it could do this. And the great thing about Taylor, and one of the first conversations we had was, we're going to get this wrong a bunch of times. There's a whole bunch of times this isn't going to work. But that's the only way to make it great, is to get it wrong a bunch of times and be willing to go down a dark alley and have to back out and find a different place. So he loves those ideas. He loves, and the other thing I really learned with him and like about him, he's not afraid to go to an emotional place. He's, I think in this day and age, as composers, you really start to get restrained and try to limit how emotional the music can get. And Taylor encouraged me he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially, gave me the mission statement of go to a really emotional place with as few notes as possible. And again, similar to the dialogue thing that Donald said, sometimes it's the space between the notes that are the most emotional, and not the notes themselves. So
thank you very much. I think that's pretty much covers it off. I've got two more easy questions, super easy questions, Andrew, then I'll leave you in peace. One is, I'm not entirely sure. You've worked on 3, what I would like to refer to as rock-related projects, which means at some point, inevitably, you may well have encountered the man. My question is he really the nicest movie star walking the earth? Just purely for my own curiosity more than anything.
Yeah, Dwayne's an awesome guy.
Yeah.
And he surrounds himself with awesome people, really good people. And I always feel that's, with the limited amount I've met him a handful of times and always been awesome, loves music, extremely musical guy. But more than that, and I've found this throughout my life, when you kind of to get a measure of the people that surround the person, it really gives you insight into what they're like. Tom, years ago, I did a film with Tom Hanks called City of Ember. He was a producer, and I remember being in his offices, and he phoned in to talk to everybody while I was there in the office. He wasn't there. I think he was filming something. And he was on speakerphone talking to the interns, talking to everybody. There was no hierarchy in terms of his human relationships with people. And Dwayne is very much like that too. Dwayne is a person first, and a really good person. And I feel really lucky to have gotten to work with him.
Perfect. And my last and final question is completely off topic. Can you describe for me your perfect Sunday afternoon?
That's changed since the pandemic. We've got a cabin up north in Canada. I haven't been in Canada a lot the last few years, but my family is here. My wife and children, this is their home base. And so right prior to the pandemic, we got a cabin up north in the woods with deer and bear and wolves and foxes and everything. And I've set up a writing studio up there in a little room, and going up there with the dog and the family and just sitting down and being creative in a completely different environment. That's my perfect Sunday afternoon. And sometimes, by the way, that entails, making a path through the forest with wood chips, etc. It's something I guess I didn't know I was longing for until it happened. So yeah, especially after a week of writing, that's a perfect Sunday afternoon.